What is going on, everybody? Ryan Clark, I guess I should say Ryan Stark here, bringing you guys a top 10 Game of Thrones episodes. Now, I was late to the party. I just started watching the show a couple months ago, and I binged through it with my mom, and we really enjoyed it, and I thought, why not do a countdown on the very best episodes of the show? So today I'll be counting down the top 10, yes, 10 episodes of Game of Thrones, based on how good they are, how impactful they are, and just how much I enjoyed them. This is my list, so keep that in mind. Yes, this list will be kind of generic in that you'll see a lot of episodes that are frequently seen on these lists because they're definitely the best episodes of the show. However, the order might vary for some people, but either way, these are 10 amazing episodes of one of my favorite shows, if not my very favorite show of all time. And of course, if you're like me and didn't watch the show, please don't watch this because there will be massive spoilers ahead starting right now.
Never forget that. Yeah, this should help you remember.
Game of Thrones as a show is full of twists, and what you just witnessed right there was the twist that just blew my mind the most, the cutting off of Jaime's head. Seriously, I was in shock. My jaw dropped at this moment. This was kind of the moment where I realized that Season 3 would end up being my favorite season, which it is indeed. I love Season 3, like a lot of fans. But this moment was insane. Locke cutting off his hand. I just remember that and then fading to the Bear and the Maiden Fair, the rock and roll version they played in the credits. And I just looked at my mom, we were watching, and both of our jaws were dropped. They were planted on the ground. That was one of the biggest, most shocking moments of the whole show. And yeah, it was really quite something. It was definitely one of those moments it's like, oh my gosh, that's insane. And I just think, oh man, that was one of the craziest moments for sure. Now, in addition to this, we do have some other moments that are building up to things we'll see later. We get the introduction of Miss Missandei, who becomes a very important and very likable character throughout the show's run. We get her introduction, which I thought was really done well. And we also get to see the horse corpses left by the White Walkers. That's one of those moments where, early in the show's run, before we really got to see a lot from the White Walkers, it was building up the White... You didn't really see a lot of the White Walkers. You saw the signs that they left, and you see them occasionally, but they were still this mysterious, terrifying figure. And seeing that was one of the moments. It's like, oh my gosh, this is serious. I think this episode overall is just kind of one of those episodes that shows what's really good about Game of Thrones, combining a bunch of good, solid storylines and then finishing off with one of the best endings in the show's history, in my opinion. I really did love the way they did the endings. So I think overall, this is one of the best episodes of the show, and that's why it's coming in at number 10.
Win no glory. I shall live and die by my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield. The guard surrounds the bed. I place my life and honor in the night's watch. For this night and all the nights to come.
Now, I'm actually not necessarily someone who watches Game of Thrones for the battles. I do love a good fantasy battle. However, personally, I do prefer some of the more character-based moments. And there's some really, really, really good character-based moments in the drama and the twists of Game of Thrones. However, that said, there are some battles on this list, and those are the good battles. And those are the battles that were awesome before we got to Season 7 and 8, where the battles just got goofy and they had fire, swords, and everything. Ugh. But anyways, as for this battle, the battle between Jon Snow and the Night's Watch versus the Wildlings, I thought this was one heck of a battle. It was just one non-stop battle in one of the best stretches of episodes the show's ever had. Going from the Mountain and the Viper to this and then to the Season 4 finale. I thought the entirety of Season 4 was really awesome. It's one of the best seasons of the show. And I really think this was one of the best episodes of it. Seeing the Ygritte death was really sad. The giants were intimidating. Riding mammoths, that was incredible. It was just amazing from a special effects standpoint. Great from a character standpoint, seeing Jon with the Ygritte, those final moments. Seeing Ollie shoot her. Seeing, Alistair Thorne being Alistair Thorne. Seeing Janos Slynt being Janos Slynt. And then, seeing Sam and Gilly's relationship. This kind of took the whole entire Night's Watch plot arc and just kind of threw it into one episode and concluded a lot of the storylines, and I think it did a really good job. I wasn't a big fan of the stuff beyond the wall in Season 3 and 4, at least compared to the rest of the stuff that was going on. It's definitely better than a lot of the stuff we've seen in Seasons 5, 7, and 8. But that being said, it really kind of came to an end here. It came to just one awesome conclusion, and I think it's one of the best episodes in the entire show, and one of the best battle scenes I've ever seen. Coming in at 8th on our list is actually one of the most famous episodes in the history of the show. This is Hardhome. Now, a lot of good stuff and interesting stuff goes on in this episode, but the main focus of this episode is, of course, the ending, the battle at Hardhome. First of all, this is a really, really crazy cool set piece, this wildling village, one of the larger wildling villages. And I really like the usage of 1-1 the Giant. But most importantly, this is one of our greatest opportunities to see how crazy the Army of the Dead is and how insane that army really is and how that's one of the biggest, if not the very biggest threat in Game of Thrones. And it also is a great use of the White Walkers as well. The Night King's moment right there is one of the most chilling and amazing moments of the whole series because they really made the Night King insanely intimidating there. Too bad it didn't end up ending that way. The Night King, unfortunately, did not go out as badass as he was here, but he truly is one of the most terrifying villains ever at this moment in any form of media because he can raise the dead, and he just did that right there in that final scene. That's one of the most iconic moments from Game of Thrones. Again, as I said before, battle episodes aren't always my favorite, but some of these battles that are on this list are some of the best battles in all of media. And I think Hardhome is an example of that. I know some people would have this battle ranked higher, but I still think this is an insane episode and one of the best, and probably the best in Season 5.
Watching your vicious bastard die gave me more relief than 1,000 lying whores. I wish I was the monster you think I am.
Everyone who watches Game of Thrones' favorite character is probably Tyrion. Well, he's not mine, but he's a very common favorite character to have because, you know, he's kind of been a great character for the first half of it, kind of being on the villain's side, but not really, but always meeting well. And then as the show progresses, well, I actually kind of think the character's ruined when they just turn him into a flat-out good guy that's not as smart as he was supposed to be, at least back in the early seasons and in George R.R. Martin's books. However, this is probably his standout episode. This is the episode that features the trial of Tyrion Lannister. Now, the rest of the episode's good too. There's some good stuff, of course. The meeting between Braavos' Iron Bank and Sir Davos and Stannis and everything. But I think that the trial is the main aspect of this episode. Although, also, I do want to mention that I really liked Yara trying to free Theon, and of course, Theon would not go. That kind of adds an interesting layer to that whole plot arc as well. A lot of people are probably expecting him to be freed, or at least him to want to be freed. But I think that this episode really stands out once we get to the trial, because it shows how vicious the world really is to Tyrion, wanting him to be guilty just because he's a dwarf and treating him like the bad guy, even though he didn't. And he really delivers that speech because he was the one that defended King's Landing in the Battle of Blackwater. However, nobody ever gave him any recognition for it except for Varys. But that's about it. Despite him saving all their asses, he really wishes that he could have killed them or whatever, looking back at it now, because they weren't going to treat him like a hero. They were still going to treat him like a villainous piece of shit, like he's been treated his whole entire life. And I think that's one of the aspects of the episode that I really found intriguing. And Shay's portion of the episode was infuriating. And Tywin, Charles Dance did a great job on that. But overall, I just thought every character played the role really well in this story. And it ends with such an awesome, epic speech that's really, really well done. And Peter Dinklage did an amazing job with this. If you see a wedding in Game of Thrones, you know something's going to go down. And The Lion and the Rose gives us the purple wedding. This is the death of Joffrey, the most unlikable character in the history of the show. And I thought they did it pretty well. Building up to his death, they made him as unlikable as ever, putting on a dwarf play representing the War of the Five Kings. And this is just a really, really despicable act. First of all, making fun of his uncle, but offending pretty much everybody there. Offending Varys by hitting him in the head. And then, of course, we have, again, as I said before, Tyrion offended because of the dwarfs. You have his wife and Loras offended by the portrayal of Renly, who rides on a horse, which is Loras, riding on a little mini Loras. I guess you'd say that's supposed to be his horse. You had Sansa offended by the portrayal of Robb Stark, the King of the North, as a jerk. You had Balon Greyjoy. You had Stannis riding the Red Woman. I just thought that was funny. And then, of course, you have Joffrey, who wins this little munchkin battle, I guess you'd say, in a rather cheesy proportion, having him hump that wolf head. It just gets more and more unlikable as it goes on. Joffrey is the most despicable character really up to this point in the show. So you're really hoping that he dies eventually. But then when he dies, It's a shocking moment, a shocking twist. And what's even more shocking is when we find out in a few episodes who actually did it. But this episode just really came out of nowhere and was really shocking, I think. It was a almost full episode of the wedding, and it was just building up to that moment. We're just waiting and waiting and waiting for that to finally happen. And when it does, it's very satisfying. Oh boy, Baylor is quite the episode. This is an episode, one of the earliest amazing episodes, and one of the most iconic and impactful episodes in the history of the show. This episode was really groundbreaking. First of all, this is one of the most memorable episodes because this kind of kicks off the War of the Five Kings. This is, of course, where Jaime's captured. We've got Robb Stark having lots of numbers and being a powerful leader, so I think that's huge. But you've also got a lot of aspects to the story here that are really quite interesting. You've got that moment between Aemon Targaryen, which we find out Maester Aemon is in fact one of the Targaryens, meeting with Jon Snow, who of course we do learn is a Targaryen as well himself. We've got Khal Drogo infected, and you've got that storyline as well. And then of course you've got the big moment that everyone was blown away by, the big shocking twist, and that is the main character of the show, the main protagonist, the guy everyone loves, Ned Stark, the most honorable man in Westeros, is executed. It just builds up to that moment. It's such a powerful moment. The way the sound all stops. It's really emotional. It's really sad. Everyone loves Ned Stark. He's a popular favorite character. He's someone that everyone cheers for because he really is the honorable man. He lives by the law. He's the lawful good of the story. And to see him die that early when a lot of people were thinking he'd be the hero and he'd end up on the throne after all, really tragic, really sad, and one of the most shocking moments. It made people realize anyone could die at any moment, because if the main character dies, then, you know, who could die next? Anybody could really die. And that's what makes this show such an interesting, fascinating watch. And this is the episode that kind of kicked off that. Some people aren't the biggest fans of season 6. Some people think it's the best season ever. I personally think it's pretty good. I think the 3 and 4, I think the original seasons are better, but I think season 6, D&D did a pretty good job with some of the new material, and some of the material that they took from George R. R. Martin is some of the best, like the whole Hodor, Hold the Door episode, which should probably be number 11 or 12 on this list. But Battle of the Bastards is just a fantastic episode. It really is one of the best battles in the show history. First of all, seeing the Wildlings and the Northmen come together to fight the most despicable villains in the whole show, the Boltons, led by the evil Ramsay Bolton. Seeing, first of all, him do his evil things, and then seeing that karma at the end, getting beat by Jon and then fed to the dogs by Sansa. Really a satisfying death for such an evil villain, one of the most evil villains ever. Of course, there's some really tragic moments too, like Rickon's death. Now, of course, Rickon was never a major character, so you never really got to, know Rickon and feel upset, but obviously you feel upset for the characters that you know well, such as Jon and Sansa, who are, of course, his siblings. And then, of course, we have 1-1's death as well, which is really well done. And I really like that how 1-1's death was what really set Jon off and made him want to kill Ramsay. It's just a really epic battle, and they're being completely outnumbered, and the Knights of the Vale showing up is a really beautiful, well-done scene. It's a very Lord of the Rings-esque as well, and it kind of reminds me of the Rohirrim showing up at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, or even when Eomer's men show up at Helm's Deep. It's very reminiscent of that, and those are some of the best scenes in fantasy films. So overall, one of the best episodes in the show's history, and one of the most well-known for good reason. At number 3, we have an episode that really could have been number 1 on this list. I think all the top 3 have actually spent a portion of my drafts of this being at number 1 on the list. So it's kind of a 3-way tie. I'm going to rank The Winds of Winter at number 3, though. But this episode is the finale of Season 6, which is some people's favorite season. And this is the episode where I think the most happens of really any Game of Thrones episode. First of all, we finally get that big reveal of who Jon Snow's parents are. Of course, we find out that his mother's Lyanna Stark, so we assume that Rhaegar Targaryen's going to be the father, and it shows Ned Stark seeing the baby Jon, and then it fades into the King in the North moment, which is a really chilling moment. Too bad it didn't really end up going anywhere, but that was a really beautiful moment. If the series ended here, nobody would be mad because it looked like Jon Snow would be the king in the North and the North would find its independence. And of course, Daenerys was coming over from the Narrow Sea with all her men. It looked like she'd be winning the war because she's all powerful now. But the real key moment of this episode was the story in King's Landing with Cersei Lannister. The blowing up of the Sept of Baelor is probably the best scene in the entire show. All 9 minutes of it. You know, as someone that had that part spoiled for me, I was sitting there knowing what was going on, but sitting there with my mom who was totally confused what it's all building up to. The best piece of musical score in Game of Thrones, one of the best pieces of musical score ever in my opinion, in The Light of the Seven, just building up to that moment, just keep building and building and building until that explosion. It's so beautiful. You know, Marjorie being the only one smart enough to figure out what's going on and trying to get out of there. And, you know, seeing Lancel Lannister almost do something good for the story once, the death of Pycelle, seeing Qyburn getting so much power and becoming the Queen's second in command, you know, seeing the whole Tommen thing, and then Tommen committing suicide. You blink and you miss it, which my mom did, but it's shocking for him to just, you know, walk out the window, and just seeing how Cersei becomes crowned queen of the Seven Kingdoms, queen of the Andals and the First Men, but she's lost everything. She's lost her kids, and she's cold and emotionless, and everything she strived for to become that queen, she never really got because, you know, she lost everything on the way, and it's just such a powerful moment, her getting coronated, and her, of course, becoming queen by blowing up the Sept of Baelor. It's such a beautiful yet scary and sad moment. It's everything at once, and that's why The Winds of Winter is one of the best episodes in TV history, really.
Mother! Get down!
My favorite battle scene in anything ever, basically, is Blackwater. I love Blackwater. Blackwater is fantastic. The battle is just amazing. Everything about it, all the moving pieces, all the characters. So many likable characters are at risk, such as Sir Davos and, of course, Tyrion Lannister, who are two major players. Tyrion leading such a brilliant defense of King's Landing until Tywin can show up. The wildfire scene was absolutely breathtaking. One of the most breathtaking moments on the show, but also one of the most horrifying when Tyrion realizes the insane impact that blowing up these ships has. The death of Mathos, and then, of course, seeing a really epic battle, seeing Stannis and his men. You know, everyone would bend the knee to Stannis. He's such an amazing character. And even though the show kind of ruined him, supposedly, I do think that he was a complete badass in this battle, wanting to fight to the very end, even though his men were completely outnumbered when two of the greatest houses in all of Westeros come to defend King's Landing. Those, of course, being House Lannister, led by Tywin, and then House Tyrell, who comes to aid them because of the death of Renly Baratheon due to the blood magic. But I really have to say, I think that it's an absolutely fantastic battle scene leading up to one of the best endings of any episode ever. And it was written by George R.R. Martin. You can really tell the dialogue is absolutely brilliant. And just that epic ending gets me every time where Tywin marches in after Cersei's telling Tommen that story of the lions and showing him that suicide's a possible way out. Really an absolutely crazy ending to one of the best episodes in the history of TV.
Fine music, but I haven't shown you the hospitality you deserve. My king has married, and I owe my new queen a wedding gift.
Number one is the episode of the Red Wedding. Because of course it is. This was the biggest twist, maybe in TV show history. Everything was leading up to the assassination of Robb Stark, Catelyn Stark, and Talisa Stark in brutal fashions. Three of the most likable characters in the show. Well, Catelyn was a bit cold, especially with Jon, but, you know, three members of the heroic family that everyone was rooting for, especially at that point in the show, and they just get brutally murdered in the most shocking way possible. It's a really tragic and sad end, and it's just some of the most compelling TV. It really impacts the rest of the show, and book fans were just waiting for it when it finally came. It was a shock. For those of you who haven't read the books, or for those people who haven't read the books, it really blew us all away, and it's truly one of the craziest, most insane, intense moments in TV show history. Everything leading up to it, all the symbolism, playing the song The Rains of Castamere, just really leads up to an epic conclusion, and, you know, one of the best episodes in TV history. Alright guys, thank you for watching this video. What are your favorite Game of Thrones episodes? Let me know, and I will see you guys all later. Goodbye, everybody.